So I guess we can start now. Maybe some more people will join later. So good morning, everyone. Welcome to this first webinar about the new releases within Workday 33. Thank you for your presence. So I am Nora Tumba, a Workday consultant, and I will be facilitating this webinar with my colleagues Alexandra Thompson and Finis Cordier.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, guys. So before we transition to the presentation, I will go over the functioning of this webinar. So all attendees will be muted throughout the webinar. The chat is disabled. However, questions can be submitted during the webinar and they will be dealt with at the end of it, if time allows it. If not, we will get back to you with the answer to your question by email. Also, note that all attendees will receive this PowerPoint presentation by email in the course of next week. So the objective of today is to provide you with a clear understanding of the upcoming changes in Workday 33, and also to see what is applicable to your company and where us at HRPath can assist you. Today, we will cover HCM and reporting, cross-application services, integrations, absence, and time tracking. Note the importance of the Workday community. All the features that we'll present today are based on customer experiences, so hopefully they apply to your needs. And if not, don't hesitate to go on Brainstorm to submit your suggestions for new features or to vote for suggestions that other customers have submitted and that you would like to see in the next Workday release. Workday Safe Harbor applies here. During this webinar, we will present features that will be either opt-in, automatically available, or for which the production date is still to be determined. So with that said, we will start with HCM, and I leave the floor to my colleague Alexandra.
Thanks a lot, Nora. So let's have a look at the HCM features together. The first one is a rather exciting one, in my opinion, as it deals with the enhancements of the change job BP. So we're all using the change job BP, obviously. And I think we all know that the change job business process can sometimes get a little complex. So Workday's goal here is to try and simplify it. So let's have a look at some images. So here in the first image, it deals with the first small change. Basically, what's happening here is that you're going to be able to change the title of when you're actually starting the task. So you can see here that we're clicking on the related actions on the employee, Ashton Burns. And then in the change job menu, you can see start job change, sorry. This is new, and this can be customized. So you basically, if you want to call it employment changes, then you can call it that. You can call it whatever you want. So that's the first thing. And the second, oh, sorry, if you can go back to the previous slide, please.
Sorry.
Yeah, and image number 2 is what happens when you click on the start job change. So it's going to be what the first screen of the change job process will look like. Before we already had like a large page with a lot of things to enter, but now we're only going to have the worker name, the position, and what you want to do with this job change. So basically the reason. And once you select this reason, it will take you to image number 3. So according to the reason that you've selected, you will only get what you're interested in changing. You will not get any additional fields to fill in that are not necessarily related to the reason you selected in the first place. So this is the big change. Templates can be configured to only show the relevant fields depending on the reason chosen. And this is in the maintain change job templates task. This is the big new feature. So let's go to the next one. It actually introduces the next feature, which is the number 2, rule-based change job templates. This is the ability to configure multiple consolidated templates for change job based on condition rules. So let's go to the next slide to illustrate a little bit. As you can see on the left, so this is the configure rule-based consolidated template task, which is a new task. On the left of the table, you can see the rule that you're going to be configuring, depending on what you're aiming to do. And on the right of the screen, you can select the business process steps or sub-processes that are going to be involved if the rule is true. So this simplifies a lot how you can configure your change job. Before, you would only do it in the regular business process definition screen, but this is a way to make it simpler now, especially if you have many condition rules in your change job process. Okay. So number 3 is quite straightforward. It's basically the ability to configure steps of the change job process and other staffing processes to have automatic completion depending on the information that was entered in Workday recruiting. So this is true if you're using Workday recruiting. And it allows for less manual processing. So this is available now for change job, but also change organization assignments, assign employee collective agreement, edit notice periods, manage probation period, and employee contracts. Number 4 is the collective agreement changes. So there are now rules and changes with the factors of the collective agreements. So we can now configure eligibility rules for collective agreements. That means that whenever you're changing or updating the collective agreement of a worker, the choices that you're going to be given are going to be applicable to that worker depending on his eligibility, basically. You're not going to have the list of all the collective agreements of the company, but only a selection depending on his eligibility. And other enhancements include how to set up and assign the collective agreements, but also, and more importantly, the ability to edit the details and factors of already assigned collective agreements. This was not possible before. Once it was used, you couldn't change these things. Okay. And number 5 is the employee contracts review. So there are a few changes here. You can now schedule employee contract reviews. So this concerns renewals and extensions of contracts for fixed-term employees. So the ability to schedule automatically before the contract end date of the person. Another new functionality which is quite interesting is the new task, maintain employee contract rules for country. This allows to configure some rules that will pop up an error message or a warning if you're trying to breach the contract limits, like if you're trying to extend somebody who shouldn't be extended. And finally, you'll be able to audit the contract renewal history for fixed-term contracts. So let's go to the next slide to see a little bit more about what it will look like. So the maintain, in image 1, you have the maintain employee contract rules for country task. You can see that, so the eligibility rule here is configured to be London location, for example. You can select the number of employee contract renewals, the maximum number, either if it's unlimited or do not allow, if you're not allowed to have any renewals. And you can select the maximum combined employee contract duration to be a certain number of days or months or weeks and so on. Okay, and the second image is what it will actually look like in the BP. So you can see here, this is what will come into the manager or the HR person inbox in Workday. So he will either get this task automatically if it was configured to be scheduled. And you can see that he's trying to, we're trying to extend the person, add a new contract, and we're getting an alert message that is telling and reminding us of the rules we're supposed to be following. Okay. So numbers 6, 7, and 8 are quite straightforward and simple functionalities. So let's speak about number 6, job profile prompt. We're going to have a new prompt to make it easier to find the job profile in the job profile field. So, so we're going to have the recent and suggested prompt categories. This is based on the user activity and context. And we're also adding with union and with work study in the additional job profiles prompt. These are categories in which you can then have a sub-menu, if you know what I mean. So this is just accessory. Number 7 is for the US. There's a new veteran status, which is not a veteran, recently separated veteran, veteran, but not a protected veteran. So these are the 3 new statuses. And number 8 is configurable name components by country. So this will provide you the ability to configure name components as hidden, optional, or required by country. And the final HCM functionality, and I think it's really the best for last, really. It's the Org Studio and Mass Actions. So these are 2 new tools which are really going to help the life of many HR people, I think. So the Org Studio is designed to, is a functionality to design organizational changes in a more intuitive way. So before we used to do the move worker or assign subordinate or assign superior for organizations, for example, etc., etc. Now we have this whole new tool that's going to help us to drag and drop and so on. I'm just going to show you this in the next slide. And the mass actions is going to happen within this Org Studio, basically, and it's going to allow you to do simple actions massively, and these actions will then be sent as one to be approved. So this is what the Org Studio looks like. In image 1, you can see the worklet. This is going to be in the home page. So this is an actual worklet. And number 2, it shows what the studio looks like. So you have an org chart here, kind of, but it's a bit different than the usual org chart you're used to because it's in the studio. So you can use the little expand arrows in the different levels of the hierarchy here to show or unshow the different levels. You can drag and drop to move organizations in a different place very easily. You can also drag and drop employees in different organizations. You can use the related actions on the organizations themselves or on the workers to rename them, to change the primary location. And there is an activity field. We don't see it here in this image, but it's on the right of the screen, an activity field provided to follow the changes that you've made. It's a very intuitive tool from what I've experienced so far. I hope that you will be able to use it and enjoy it. So this is it for the Org Studio and actually the HCM functionalities. I'm now going to speak to you about the reporting functionalities. So the first functionality is the customer contract reports. Workday 33 is expanding reporting with increasing the number of reports that you can copy to create custom reports regarding customer contracts. That's the first one. Second functionality is reporting for package content. So package content is related to the learning module. So you're going to be interested in this if you have the learning module. Workday 33 enables you to opt in to importing questions and responses for any package content into Workday. So this helps you to report on knowledge assessments that have package content in them. Workday provides interaction response data for all new completions, enabling you to report on the learner responses in courses that have package content. So let's have a look at this feature. So to enable it, you're going to have to go to the Edit Tenant Setup HCM, and you have this tick box called Enable Package Content Interaction Reporting. Then if you navigate to the desired course and go to the Enrollment tab, yeah, you will get another tab called Lesson Interaction Tracking, and this is where this is what you've just enabled. And this is what it will look like. It gives you some details about the course and the trainees' answers. It's also possible to retrieve this information by creating a custom report with the following business objects and fields. Now, I can probably imagine that it's very small in your screen right now, but as you're going to go away with this presentation, I'm going to leave you to analyze this for later, perhaps. Okay. Number 3 is resource management reporting. So Workday 33 delivers new reporting capabilities for resource management. This is if you have project workers in Workday. So it provides a more comprehensive view for project workers, and it's streamlining your capacity planning and productivity analysis. So the impact here is on security. Let's have a look. You will also need to edit the tenant setup at a new tick box there. It's called Run Project Worker Days Job, as well as the start month and start day for Project Worker Days Job. So this, in this feature, Workday will update the role-based security for any resource management reports. So any users that have a role on a project can now access specific data on other project workers when they log time against the project, even if they're not directly assigned to resource plan line. So for a user to gain access to this data, the project role must still have the access to each data source in the security setup. Functionality number 4 is the drill to reports links for matrix reports. So Workday adds more flexibility for drill down reports, enabling you to run other reports from matrix reports results. So if you have a matrix report to start with, you will easily be able to navigate between this matrix report to a drill to report very easily. So let's have a look at some images to illustrate. So in this image, you can see a matrix report. That's the report you're going to start with. So let's go to the next slides one by one. And this is the second report, which is a drill to report, which will be connected to the previous report whenever you click on one of the different components of the report, one of the different blue blocks. So let's see how it works in very quick terms. In the next slide. This is a bit of an explanation on how to configure it. I will not go into too much details here, but it's good for you to go away with this with these slides to see how to actually configure it. So basically, you're going to have to perform a few actions here of configuration to be able to link the drill to report to this matrix report. Okay, let's go to the next slide. So from the previous page, you could create the drill to report. So this is the next task, basically, create the drill to report link. And then you're creating the report itself with the different values and fields that you want to have in this drill to report. And to see the results, so that would be in the next slide, here you can see by clicking in one of the blocks, you have a menu of actions, and on the right you can see drill to report links. So that's a list of different links of reports, and the drill to report that was created and linked to the matrix report. So we're going to click on this drill to report, and in the next slide you can see that this drill to report opens and gives you the details of this particular part of the previous report, of the previous matrix report. I will now give the word to Tinus to continue with cross-application services. Thank you.
Thank you, and good morning. I would like to apologize beforehand for my voice. I am suffering a little bit from a cold, so please bear with me. I will be highlighting a few cross-application services that we want to highlight for you from the new release for Workday. So the first feature is that you can reconfigure or configure who can reassign tasks or items in the business processes. So you can assign, if we look at the next slide, you can go to the business process, for instance, and you can look at the permissions for the business process, and there you will find a new action, reassign tasks, and you can determine which security groups you would like or would allow to be able to reassign their tasks allocated to them. You can imagine that everybody that needs to go through a business process, or managers or whomever, you would not like everybody to be able to reassign their tasks, and therefore this feature was included to be able to control, further control what is happening with tasks. Next slide. The second feature we would like to focus on is worker data reports. Now, as you know, in Europe we are busy implementing or conforming to the new GDPR legislation. So this makes it quite easy for you to see what data you have for active or terminated workers. If we go to the next slide, you will be able to see that you can assign, first you have to assign a number of security groups to people who will have access to these reports. And then once these people have their access to these data reports, they can run them and they can see what information is kept in Workday. Now you can, for instance, think about Germany, which has got very strict laws on what data you can keep and how long you can keep it in a system. So this is very useful if you need to purge some information after somebody's been terminated, say for a couple of years, or information like that, which is not allowed to be kept, or any kind of information that you should not or must have according to the law. If we move on to the next feature, multi-factor authentication, already a feature in Workday, multi-factor authentication. In the current security climate, with a lot of hacks going on, I'm sure you read about it daily, passwords being hacked from systems, it is almost unthinkable to not have access to Workday without multi-factor authentication. As it is now, Workday has given you a number of authentication types that you can connect to a certain rule set, so that users can choose which way they would like to authenticate themselves in the system. If we look at the next slide, you will see that first you have to go set these up in the tenant setup, and this you will find under the security settings. Here you can see that Workday has given you a number of options. You can authenticate via Authenticator app, backup codes, or a one-time passcode via SMS. So here you can decide whether you would like to enable the feature or a certain way of authenticating. I can imagine that in a company you would have one way of authenticating, maybe a preferred third-party application on a mobile phone or via SMS, and then here you can just switch it on. If we look at the next slide, you will see that you can apply these to a certain authentication policy. So you will have to look at the manage authentication policies. Here you can then just click on your policy, and then once you're in the policy, you can configure what are the options for people to be able to verify their identity. So I would assume that in most cases here in the highlighted box, you would probably just have one option, probably just an authentication app. Let's move on to the next slide. Integrations. Workday has improved a number of features on integrations, starting with the worker connector. I assume, or if you have a bit of experience, you would have also heard about the PG connector in Workday, which is the payroll connector. In that connector, it has always been possible that any changes to a certain manager will also reflect the workers that are touched by that change. This feature is now also available in the worker connector, which means that, say for instance, you change a manager of a department, then all workers in that department will be extracted in the next run of this integration to pass on to a third-party system or a downstream system that for certain workers the manager has changed. You can imagine that some downstream applications also have a type of hierarchy where they need to know who is the manager and which workers fall under that manager. And with this new feature, you can easily communicate that information to a downstream system. Let's just have a look at the setup in the next slide. So basically, what I've just said now is what is listed in this slide. You will be able to send all kind of information that influences the manager change or anything that would touch a worker. You will be able to send it downstream. There are certain things that you need to have switched on. For instance, the transaction log service must be switched on, and you must be subscribed to all transaction types. Moving on, we can see how we can switch it on in the integration. So basically, you go into the integration services and you switch the data, the worker data service on, and then it should be working. Let's move on to the next slide. So basically here, you can always switch it on. So you go into the integration attributes and you tell it that you always want to include workers with a manager change in the output. So it's still an option that you can switch it on or switch it off, but you have the availability. Moving on. The next one is, as I referred to, the PG payroll integration, which is used for communicating payroll data to a payroll vendor. Here you will now have the option to always include the contract data section. You can imagine that payroll vendors might find it useful to know what contract you are referring to when you are communicating a worker to the payroll integration, or maybe, as we will see in the next slide, you can also determine certain situations where it is necessary to send this information. So first of all, you need to activate the PG integration, and this you can do by configuring the integration service and making sure that the payroll effective change in the interface is switched on. As you know, you can only use a PG integration on tenants which are grid enabled due to the processing power that is needed for it. Moving on to the next slide, we can see how this will be configured within the integration attributes. So basically you have this option added here includes the contract data section. And if we look at the next slide, you will see which options we have to be able to configure it. So you can determine whether you would like it to be switched on always, which means that it will always be included no matter what. If there is a change on a worker, even if it's only a address field, you will always get the contract data section. You can have it switched on during a PGI event, which means a PGI is a pay group in event. This means that when a worker moves from one pay group to another pay group, you can imagine that somebody will move from a monthly processing to a weekly processing. Then we move that worker into a new pay group, and this information is then also sent to the payroll vendor with the contract information. By default, if you send the contract data section, the integration will always send all contracts that exist for a certain worker in Workday. So you might imagine that somebody had an initial contract when they were hired and then later promoted or changed to a different business unit, and a new contract was assigned. So the old one is closed and you have current open one. Then by default, both of those will be sent to the payroll vendor unless you choose exclude ended contracts here, and only the current active open contract will be sent. Moving on to the next feature, worker payroll input async. So basically what we can do here, if we move to the next slide, this is just to enhance the performance and the processing within Workday. So basically what we can do here is we can assign certain tags to incoming documents from a payroll vendor. You have to switch this feature on in the integration services, and if we move to the next slide, you can see that we can assign a tag to certain input files. So if you assign a tag to an input file, you can in the downstream integration determine whether you would like to process only documents with certain tags, which means that other irrelevant documentation or files that might be delivered by the vendor will not be processed. This just makes for a more efficient way of processing incoming files. If you move on to the next slide, external payslips for employee self-service. If you have any experience with this at this moment, you will know that the only way at the moment to display a payslip from an external vendor in Workday was to import these payslips via an integration into Workday itself, which means we had to the payslips had to be delivered in a PDF format to Workday. Those will be then picked up by a certain integration, and they will be actually loaded into the Workday tenant itself. With this feature, if we go to the next slide, that whole process is not necessary anymore. Your payroll must build a REST API and have an endpoint. So basically what then happens is when the worker prefers their payslips, Workday goes to an endpoint at the vendor system and requests these payslips and then displays them, which means that the whole process of delivering files to Workday and then having it picked up by an integration is not necessary anymore. So if we go to the next slide, we can see a little bit how it will be set up. First of all, you should, okay, here we have a display of what it would look like. It will tell you the external payslips, and then here you can see it has been requested via that REST API, and it tells you these payslips are available. Moving to the next slide, we can see how it is configured. First of all, you need to create an external payroll vendor. I would assume that if you come to this point where you're importing payslips, you're already exporting payroll information to a payroll vendor, which means that this would already be set up. But you can create here an external payroll vendor, and you can also say which features you would like to be available for this vendor. Looking at the maintained pay group vendor associations, you can see here that we associate the vendor we just created up in the previous, or in the slide at the top. We connect that feature, external payslips, to a certain pay group and to a certain payroll organization type. So basically this means that the whole labor of running an integration, having to be in sync with a payroll vendor when those payrolls payslips will be available, because most often it is the case that you cannot schedule this integration at a regular interval, as the pay dates or the payslips are never available on the same date every month. So this just makes the whole process a lot more streamlined and easy. Moving on, I will now hand you over to my colleague for the absence presentation.
Okay, thank you, Venus. So now we're moving on to our first feature in absence. That is quite a big breakthrough for Workday. So, as you may already know, Workday benchmarking, that is available since Workday 29, enables you to compare your company's important metrics with other Workday customers, and all of that within your tenant. So it currently offers more than 70 benchmark metrics across full functional areas that are HCM, financial, recruiting, and Workday usage. So now absence is one of those, is part of those functional areas. So it actually enables you to compare your key performance indicators, such as organizational level absences, with those of the collective benchmarking customer community. So it delivers 4 new benchmarks for time, absence, and payroll functional areas. This allows, as I said, to compare your KPIs with other Workday customers, and there are 4 benchmarks available under absenteeism. So we have time off taken in hours, time off taken in days, leave taken in hours, and leave taken in days. So this feature can be enabled from the benchmarking opt-in page that you see here on the screenshot. In order for you to be able to receive and to use automatically these benchmarks as they are released, you just need to first sign the innovation services agreement to be able to opt in towards the benchmarking, and then to have the full benchmarks in absenteeism, you need to check this box here that says subscribe to all current and future categories, so that you can use those benchmarks. So this is what the benchmark looks like once we have run the benchmark versus actual reports that you can see on the left. So you just choose the elements that you want to integrate in your comparison. So you choose the benchmark, then you choose the industry group. Here, for example, you can see education, nonprofit, etc., the type of industries, the size, and you can also choose the location, or you can take it away from your elements of comparison. So then in the middle, you see the benchmark reports under a graph form. Under the first part, like the one, you see the values that fit the values for your company that fit the criteria used on the left part. In the second framed part, this is your own tenanted value, and here it falls between the 25th and 50th percentile. And in the third framed part, this is the number of participants. So note that this number is always shown as a range by Workday in order to protect their customers' information. So that's it for the absence benchmarking. Moving on to the absence tables. Absence tables is a functionality that was already available with Workday 32, and now with Workday 33 there is an update on sorry, a new validation type. There is the report absence tiers report that was updated, and there is also a new report on absence tables report that is made available. So actually, I don't know if all our clients use absence tables, but their main functionality, their main function, is to allow for the cascading of an employee from one time off to another. So it is actually used to group related time off together. And so with Workday 33, there is a new report for this for the absence tables. So the new report is all absence tables. So it enables you to view all absence tables for your tenant. And there is a new reason field on absence tables that enables you to report on why workers create an absence request. So we move on to our third absence feature, that is the mass operations for time off. So again, that mass operation management is a report that is already available in Workday. And here, Workday delivers 2 new reports related to mass operation management. So those 2 new reports are correct time off and request time off. So now you can advance those 2 events until, you can mass advance those 2 events until completion. So let's see what it looks like. So you have a screenshot of either reports here. So those 2 reports can be, one of the 2 reports can be used, for example, by an administrator who needs to complete a set of in-progress time off corrections or requests before the payroll is run, for example, or another use case would be when the client is at the implementation stage, if a set of in-progress events needs to be massively advanced before the customers go live, for example. So the request and correct time of business processes are accessible for mass operation management, and the use of those two BPs is quite simple. So from the mass operation management task, you choose to advance the BP selected. You select the report concerned, and then you just need to run it, and you check the box send to completion to complete the task. Sorry, obviously. And to enjoy this new feature, you need to add security groups to the manual advanced section of the correct time of business process policy. Sorry. Now our fourth absence feature, that is the time off on mobile. So the Workday brings updates to the mobile experience when requesting time off on Workday for Android, iPad, and iPhone. So it is now possible to add attachments such as medical certificates from your phone, and workers with multiple positions can request time off against the position and view the balances for each position. So we can quickly take a look at the screenshot to see what it looks like. So there are 3 main improvements for mobile, for time off on mobile. So there is an enhanced user interface for requesting time off, the ability to add attachments, and a support for position-based time off plans for workers who have multiple positions, as I said earlier. So the user can scroll through months and select days by tapping on them. And it is also possible, as I said too, as you can see on the right, to select, to request a time off for a specific position, and also to add attachment to the request from your cell phone. Then users can see the detail for a request or correct an approved time off by tapping on the calendar. So when they tap on the 1st of July, for example, they see, sorry, not on the 1st of July, but the 22nd, they see the details of the absence requested. And users can also access their balance from the menu. So on the third screenshot from the left, you select the menu. You can see the balances and verify the balances for all positions if the worker has multiple positions. So now we move on to our last module for this webinar, that is time tracking. So the first new feature that we'll take a closer look at is the manager-created work schedule assignments. That is quite important and useful. So Workday provides a new way for managers to create and assign worker-specific work schedule calendars in a single step, and this reduces administrative overhead and increases scheduling efficiency. So before this feature, managers can only assign work schedules that have been created by an administrator. And with the new task, managers can create and assign work schedules in a single combined step. So it is quicker for the manager, and it gives more control and flexibility to assign unique schedules to workers rather than having to select from a list of existing work schedule calendars configured by administrators. So for this, you run the new assign work schedule task. You select a worker, a start date, and an optional end date. Then you can choose to the source of this schedule. So it can be from the current schedule of the worker, from a blank schedule, from another worker schedule, or from work schedule calendar. So whatever the source I choose, I can define a new schedule and then change the pattern details of this schedule. Then I can use the view schedule for worker task to verify the changes made. And there is also this new task that you can see on the right, schedule history for worker, that allows to see the schedule assignment history for worker. Now moving on to our second feature for time tracking, that is mass submit time. The mass submit time was used to be a task. Now it is a report. So it is now possible to search for and select workers according to their context. So it can be the cost center, the customer org, etc. So this improves the ability to submit time for specific subsets of workers. So we see that now there is a facet search, which facilitates, which makes it easier to select the workers that are concerned by the mass submit time. And from the left panel, we see different type of filters. So I can search for the workers according to the supervisory organization, to the cost center, location, time entry template, etc. So once completed, Workday 33 also adds confirmation of which workers had their time submitted. So when the relevant subset of workers is selected, the mass submit process is the same as before. So I select the workers, then I run the mass submit time, and then I have when the process is completed, I receive a notification with the details of what was submitted and for whom. Now our third new feature for the time tracking module is the time entry restrictions. So it is now possible to take action for the users as they enter their time. So it is possible, for example, to require a comment for when a worker is entering his time, and also to restrict time entry in the future. So I will go deeply into this new feature. So as I said, it is possible to restrict future time entry for specific typologies by simply checking the box that you see on the left screenshot on the relevant time entry code, and it is also possible to require a comment when a worker is entering its time and his time, and it is possible to require this comment up to 3 days before to the time when the time entry is happening. And the last feature is multiple shifts and breaks in a day. So when creating a work schedule calendar with patterns, you can now select multiple shifts and breaks from the new schedule pattern type prompt on the schedule pattern grid, so that you can create work schedule calendars that have multiple shifts and multiple breaks in a single day. So within Workday, the terminology is a bit different. You can see it, you can read it from the screenshot. So in Workday, it is called multiple shifts and meals, but it is quite the same. So when creating a work schedule calendar with patterns, you can, for example, add 2 breaks in the same day for a worker who has a very long shift, for example. So this concludes the demo.
So, and it actually concludes the whole webinar for Workday 33 for part 1. If you have any questions, please feel free to send them to us directly, and we'll be happy to get back to the concerned persons directly by email. Thank you so much for your attention today and for attending. We're going to have our second session on Thursday at 11 a.m. French time. So please feel free to join us again for the next module's explanations of Workday 33's features. And that's it. Thank you very much again. Bye-bye.